Hi! Here we are again, still celebrating the 20th anniversary of the live-action Pretty Guardian Sailor Moon. It's me, Sailor Mr. Mercury Fusion. Yeah, I script these videos and I still left that one in. Just spare a moment to consider the jokes that didn't make it this far. This is the third installment of this video series, which I've now made a handy-dandy playlist for. First, I did a spoiler-light primer of the series. Last time, I gave an in-depth look at Sailor Moon herself. Now it's time to start digging into her wacky, silly, hilarious, broken, tortured, miserable friends. Those are not incongruous. Remember our mantra for this series: Power Rangers soap opera, LSD rocket sled. Ah, Mizuno Ami, Sailor Mercury. She's the smart one, the well-behaved one. Any deviation from that would be throwing out the core of the character, so obviously they don't do that. But while other versions tend to take it for granted that the brilliant, poised perfection you see on the surface is the reality, this show revels in exploring all the cracks in that perfection. This Ami is painfully awkward and shy. As I keep saying, all of Sailor Moon's companions are some flavor of loner, but Ami is the only one who clearly doesn't want to be. She longs for friends and wants to be a good friend, but she struggles to understand how. Her mother is a busy doctor who communicates with Ami primarily through messages on a whiteboard, which is just the saddest thing in the world. It's clear Ami has not had any experience socializing. She's also used to other students cozying up to her for access to her wonderful mind, so she doesn't easily trust people. But once she does, she is all in. She absolutely cherishes her friends and appreciates how having them has transformed her life. You just know she's the one who put together this friendship photo collage in their hideout. However, due to her insecurities, she is very quick to question those friendships and is not one to forget a betrayal. One of the changes this series makes is putting Ami into the same class as Usagi so they can explore what shakes loose with that dynamic. And that results in a feud between her and Naru over Usagi's affections that lasts for a few episodes. There's a bit of an inside joke with this rivalry, given that Kawabe Chieko, who played Naru, had just finished a run as Sailor Mercury in the Sailor Moon stage musicals. Ami is used to being well-behaved, not being a burden, not having problems, so it comes as quite a shock to her to realize that she actually harbors extreme feelings of jealousy towards Naru for being the friend she wishes she could be to Usagi. And unfortunately, because she's not one to typically make a fuss about her needs but just goes with the flow, that makes her somewhat easy to take for granted, as someone who's always going to be there. All of those attributes form a perfect storm, culminating in perhaps the most iconic concept unique to this series. Kunzite kidnaps Ami when everyone is too busy with their own melodramatic plotlines to pay attention to her. And that leads to... Meet Dark Mercury, the evil Power Ranger of this series. Oh, I love her so much. Look at that design. I want to be that too. Dark Power! What, you think I have a Dark Mercury costume? No, I'm not made of money. The great thing about Dark Mercury is that even though she is being controlled, the emphasis is still on Ami as a character, how she chooses to filter her evil objectives through her own needs, like how she brainwashes Usagi's class to like her. Oh look, I have all the friends now, let's see how you like eating on the roof alone. All of that bitterness and resentment Ami's been too polite to address in a healthy way come pouring out of Dark Mercury. But she also manifests in other ways. When Nephrite has been cast out by Beryl and mocked by his peers, Mercury shows a small measure of kindness to him, admitting that seeing him all alone doesn't sit right with her for some reason. Dark Mercury also has a thing for looking absolutely iconic on carousel horses. In fact, her passing out on one is the first sign that something is wrong with her, right after she drags Makoto to the amusement park with an uncharacteristic joviality and confidence. At first, this sequence just seems like weirdness for the sake of weirdness, to hint that something's up. But later in the series, we find out just how much those carousel horses always meant to her. This proto-Dark Ami is simply Ami taking up space, doing what makes her happy and not feeling guilty for expressing those needs to her friends. Dark Mercury is that impulse taken to its extreme, whereas Ami before this is the opposite extreme of not expressing needs at all. The healthiest version of Ami is probably somewhere around here. I'm not pleased though that after Ami breaks free of Kunzite's grasp, she doesn't remember any of it. I think that's a mistake. While what she did isn't her fault, snatching away those memories robs her of the opportunity to recognize the baggage that motivated her actions. However, she does come out of this more confident, someone who can stand up to her friends and even her mom. The only issue with Ami though is that the series is so front-loaded with her storylines that her prominence fades quite a bit in the second half. Talking about my storyline, here's a trinket from my character arc. And Ami was also present. I've always loved Sailor Mercury. That should be obvious. But this version of Ami resonates with me so much. I was also the gifted child. I do see my self-worth as tied to my ability to be useful. I do tend to shrink myself and fail to express my own needs. I do feel like I have to be perfect all the time. Naturally, this wonderfully adorable genius with so many issues to work through has very quickly become my favorite incarnation of Sailor Mercury. And I think we all know the lesson to take away from this. If your friend wants you to take her to the amusement park immediately after being sick, run! She's turning evil! Hino Rei, Sailor Mars, as always, is the psychic Hikawa Shrine Maiden. Anyone who's seen a Sailor Moon will recognize her Miko robes or her performing divinations in front of fire. That's all here and accounted for. In the first animated version, Rei is known for being Usagi's foil. A recurring source of humor is the two of them bickering and insulting each other. That show creates a juxtaposition of Rei being self-reliant while being just as immature and boy-crazy as Usagi. As that isn't really her role or personality in the manga, there's not much of that here. Usagi and Rei do butt heads on occasion, but because they are very different people. This Rei is far more stoic, introspective, heavily responsible, and crafty. She has no interest in men whatsoever. Much of her backstory is lifted from the comic one-shot Casablanca Memory, which establishes her strained relationship to her prominent politician father. Rei blames him for being so busy with his career that he wasn't present when her mother was dying. He in turn only seems to trot her out for appearances when he needs to present the image of a happy family. Casablanca Memory really only uses Rei's father as a backdrop for the actual story of Rei having her heart broken by one of his aides. Here, the love story is dropped, and Rei's father actually enters into the story for a couple of episodes in order to be pretty awful. Actually, I really love what they do here. The episodes heavily hint that there's more to Rei's father's story than he's letting on. The expectation is set up that he will reveal some huge secret that will justify why he wasn't around when his wife died. Rei arranges a dramatic confrontation at her mom's grave. The stage is set for some mind-blowing revelations. And the answer is... he was busy. At work. Like he's always said. Why do you keep asking about this? The point is, and it's a really good lesson, is that Rei needs to be the one to let this go. It's not because he deserves her forgiveness, but because she deserves to not have to carry it around anymore. I said in my first video that this show is not exactly subtle, and it often isn't, but this is handled really well. It never explains any of this, it just shows it. Rei is highly motivated and has the makings of a leader, but she's so self-sufficient that she rarely has patience for anybody else, preferring to strike out on her own. She's very much the Raphael. Rei does have a soft spot for children though, particularly those who, like her, have lost parents. When introduced, she readily accepts her responsibilities as Sailor Mars, but makes it clear she has no interest in spending time with the others socially. It's a job, nothing else. Obviously, she softens that stance over time. In the early episodes, she's paired off a lot with Ami. As Usagi and Makoto tend to be a bit more flighty, Ami and Rei serve as the responsible characters, the ones taking the initiative in their goals. There's more to say about Rei, but I can't get into it right now. What I consider her most interesting developments involve another character, so let's put a pin in her for now. We'll talk about her more, I promise. Kino Makoto is Sailor Jupiter. Her characterization should be largely familiar to anyone experienced with Sailor Moon. She's a tall, tomboyish transfer student who hides a softer, feminine side and amazing cooking skills. In this version, she's also the team's official freaky babe. What are you looking at me like that for? It's what her shirt says. Having lost both of her parents, as well as seemingly having been rejected by everybody in her life ever, this Makoto not only takes it for granted that she is alone, she wears that loneliness as a badge of honor. She certainly takes to having friends more readily than Rei, but she tends to put herself in the team mom role, prioritizing their needs and getting involved in their dramas over her own. She distrusts Tuxedo Mask so much and disapproves of him getting close to Usagi that she actually decks him upon finding out who he is. What is certainly Makoto's most well-known bit of backstory is her senpai who rejected her. In the original manga story arc, this comes into play when she meets Motoki, who runs the arcade, and she moons over him briefly because he reminds her of that same boy. The animated series turns this into a running gag, where almost literally every boy she meets reminds her of her lost love and sends her into a romantic spiral. And this is where the live-action Makoto deviates the most, and that requires me to dig into Motoki a bit. In other versions, Furuhata Motoki is something of the platonic ideal of the bland, generic nice guy. He's the perfect older brother figure, someone who always indulges Usagi and her friends whenever they come to the arcade. He's the person Usagi would prefer to be Tuxedo Mask, rather than the teasing and acerbic Mamoru. In the live-action version, Motoki has a far larger role than any other incarnation, and has been completely retooled into a lovable weirdo. He's good-natured, but extremely socially awkward. Not in the shy and retreating way of Ami, but in the I'm gonna get right up in your face and overshare how much I love turtles kind of way. And yes, he does love turtles, particularly his pet turtle Kamekichi that he takes with him everywhere. In a lot of ways, he's basically become the substitute for the absent Umino character. When Makoto gives him a handmade scarf as an obligatory Valentine's Day present, he falls in love with her. However, unlike anime Makoto's, I have a crush on every boy! Live-action Makoto is far more withdrawn. In fact, she's introduced by way of being humiliated by bullies sending her a fake love note. As an aside, this episode was the moment I knew this series was going to be good. The single gag bullies from the animated series are expanded into a pivotal role. Originally, they just served to introduce Makoto's fighting prowess and immediately disappear. Here, because they can't best her physically, their revenge manages to target exactly where Makoto is most insecure. Their actions, as well as that of the monster tricking girls into romance, so get at the heart of this character. I think it's Makoto's best introduction. But because of that, she's very much I am so not making that mistake again, and rejects romance at every turn. She clearly values Motoki as a friend, but initially makes it clear she's not comfortable pursuing a relationship with him. And while Motoki can come on a bit strong, to his credit, he accepts this rejection gracefully and maturely. The other characters, particularly Usagi, ship them hard and try to concoct situations where they might hit it off. As hard as it is to believe, I assure you this scene of Makoto in a turtle costume and Motoki in safari gear searching for turtles makes sense in context. Given how much more this series focuses on Usagi's and Mamoru's established romance, the Makoki ship fulfills much of the will they won't they quota of the second half of the series. And like with Rei, I'm going to need to come back to her a little bit later, so let's just add another pin right here. Boop. Now, you might be wondering, does everything in this show work? Of course not. In fact, I'm gonna do a whole video on elements where PGSM totally drops the ball, in my opinion. But let me give you a couple of examples right now. Even in a show as toyetic as this, these Sailor Star tambourines are absolutely ridiculous. They look like giant teething rings. Even Makoto's first instinct upon getting hers isn't to use it as a weapon, but to use it to summon a cab. I can take the plush cat seriously, but whenever the Sailor Guardians fight against the forces of evil using the power of Davy Jones, it cracks me up. I did seriously consider buying one though, and only didn't because I couldn't afford it. I don't pretend to have any shame. But that slightly less than perfect track record also follows into its characters. While Princess Sailor Moon is a transformation that is absolutely necessary for the story this show is trying to tell, and Dark Mercury is just the coolest and saddest thing ever, its other original transformation, arguably, isn't really any of those. And that is Sailor Luna. Yes, about halfway through the series, Luna gets the ability to turn into a young girl who can also transform into a Sailor Guardian. And like Lunch in Dragon Ball, she can change between her human and cat forms by sneezing. There's certainly a lot to find charming about her. She has her own wand, she likes to bash Kunzite over the head with an oversized fan, she can teleport around the room, she uses a cell phone to transform because it's 2004, her aesthetic and attacks are rooted in sweets, and because she is a magical talking cat, she's the only sailor who does have cartoon-colored hair at all times, even when she's not transformed. So hey, there you go, we have the wacky hair in this show after all. So why does this even happen? Well, it's Silver Crystal shenanigans. Don't expect a better explanation than that. And don't even expect that explanation to be delivered well. The show relegates it to a recap because I guess they forgot to write it into the show. The real explanation is probably that someone wanted a kid character to appeal to younger children, which, you know, that's fine, I guess, if it works. I also wouldn't be surprised if they wanted to have Chibi-Usa in this show, but knew it wouldn't be possible to fit her into this storyline. In fact, I've read that Koike Rina, who played Sailor Luna, assumed she had been cast to play Chibi-Usa. Here's the truth. I don't have anything against Sailor Luna. I don't necessarily mind sassy kid characters. I actually like Scrappy-Doo. And that's a weird comparison for me to make, given that Luna would be terrified of Scrappy-Doo. Luna's performer does a good job. Her aesthetic is cute. It's not that she pulls too much focus. In fact, it's the opposite. She doesn't feel like she needs to be here. It's already a hard sell. Han Keiko is the only performer from the animated series to reprise her character for the live action, which is one of those bones thrown to fans to give it credibility. Why make her split her role with someone else? Human Luna just needlessly complicates things. The premise is a weird disconnect. There are times when Luna the girl seems like a totally different character than the cat, which is jarring. Then there are other times when she's giving guidance where it seems like it could have come straight out of the cat's sewn-on mouth. And that pulls me out because I start wondering on what basis the decision was made for which Luna to be in which scene. If this had any kind of impact on the story or the character, that would be one thing. Instead, it often just feels like the two Lunas tag team so that one can take a smoke break while the other is working. The worst part of this is that it often feels like the show doesn't want her there. Because of the way the show uses her, I ended up calling her Sailor Understudy. If there's a situation where the story needs even teams or some of the other characters are missing from the lineup, then Sailor Luna will be allowed to participate. But anytime something serious or important is happening, or if there's a focus on the team as a whole, Luna's gonna be the cat. Or she's just going to be conspicuously absent because she's not meant to be cared about or have an impact on the story. For the final battle, they totally leave her at home with Artemis. She rarely feels like part of the team, which just makes me sad. And that's ultimately my problem with Sailor Luna as a concept. She's just enough of a focus to be distracting, but not enough of a focus to feel meaningful. Honestly, her performer deserved far better. And that's it for today. That's everybody, right? Wait, no. I still have all these stupid pins! Well, I have 2 pins, but they're really hard to hold on to in gloves like these. I mean, I can barely operate my teleprompter remote. That's made filming these videos extremely difficult. I just needed you to know that. But enough about that. We're missing somebody really important. And that's Sailor Venus. Well, I think I've saved the best for last because Sailor Venus's story is really the one that ties a lot of the themes together, hence these stupid pins! There's a lot to talk about, as she's definitely the most different Sailor Guardian in this retelling. So next time we'll tackle her as well as the villains. You'll see they kinda go hand in hand. Thanks so much for watching. Please head on over to patreon.com/MrFusion if you want to help out the channel. Special thanks to Miss Dream and Sea of Serenity for their awesome Sailor Moon websites. I'll see you next time! You want to know my secret? This teleprompter remote is my transformation device. It transforms me into some schmuck who shouts into a camera every other week.